In this video, I'm going to talk about some best practices for live streaming your church service, all about cameras, mixing audio, and even how to get your video encoded and streaming online. Hello, I'm Ballast. Welcome to my channel where I explore worship technology solutions. This video is part 1 in a series on live streaming your worship services. Here at our church, we've been streaming for about 5 years now, and I've helped some other churches get set up and running with their streams, and I want to help you be successful in your streaming endeavor. I'm going to share with you some of the things that I've learned, some best practices for everything from choosing a streaming service and what encoder to use, to selecting a camera and mixing your audio. The first thing I'd encourage you to do is sit down and develop a roadmap for your live streaming plan and your video system. Start with where you are now. Do you have any video equipment already that you can use, like a camera, computer, or video interface? Maybe you record your sermons and post them online already. That's where you start on your roadmap. Then think about, where do you want to be? What's the goalpost for a win in your situation when it comes to live streaming? Many of us don't have huge budgets to work with, so sometimes it's easier to present and get funding for some smaller steps along the way planned out over a few years. That's the nice thing about video systems, is they easily grow and expand, especially if you start with a good roadmap. When we started doing live video here, we did an initial push with some significant funding to get things off the ground, but it didn't finish the project. I'm still adding to and refining what we do each year. An important thing to consider in your roadmap is where you want to stream to. If you're just starting out, there are now some great free ways to stream, like Facebook Live and YouTube. Or you might want to embed your stream on your website, which usually requires a paid service. Where you want to send your stream will in some instances determine what encoding method and hardware you use. A lot of encoding solutions now are getting more generic and will work with a lot of the major streaming services, but it's always good to check it out, or use a solution recommended by the streaming provider you choose. Whatever you choose, I highly recommend that you use a hardware encoder. Encoding is the process of taking your video signal, which is an uncompressed massive amount of data, and compressing it down into a stream of data that can be sent over the internet. Some solutions will do all the encoding in software on a computer, and my experience has been that this isn't as reliable as using an external encoder that is a dedicated piece of hardware, something like the Pterodactyl Video or the Blackmagic Designs H.264 Pro recorder. Here at our church, we use Livestream, and I use a Blackmagic H.264 Pro recorder connected to a PC with their producer app. It's been rock solid stable for us for several years now, and through that one connection, we embed our stream on our website and simultaneously have it sent to our Facebook page. Obviously, you'll need to make sure your internet connection is capable of streaming. If at all possible, I recommend you get a dedicated internet connection for your stream. A general rule of thumb is that your internet connection should have 2 times the upload speed as the data rate of your stream. You can use something like speedtests.net to verify your internet upload speeds. Be aware that any other traffic on your connection has the potential to cause problems with your stream and knock you offline, or cause your video to have to buffer. So minimize as much other traffic on that network as possible. Okay, let's talk about cameras. When people are starting out streaming, I see the question quite often, which camera should I use for low light? Or what's the cheapest camera that's good in low light? Some are better than others, but I'm sorry to have to say it, the answer is no camera is good at low light. And especially no cheap cameras are good at low light. I know most of you don't want to hear it, but work on your lighting. Get that right first, and just about any camera is going to give you decent results. Proper lighting is what makes your video look good, not the camera. Let me demonstrate something. Right now, what you're seeing is the video from one of our video system's cameras. It's a $5,000 camera. Now this is a $200 camera. Let me ask you, did the first camera really look $4,800 better? What made this cheap camera look so good? Lighting. You'll save yourself a lot of grief by working on your lighting and not worrying so much about which camera is going to look good in low light. You should be choosing your camera based on other factors like how it fits into your workflow, things like what outputs it has, camera control, and lens options. In a future video in this series, I'm going to talk specifically about lighting for video and setting up your cameras so they look the best they can. If you need to, start with a simple $200 camera and get your lighting right first. That will produce better results and be a lot cheaper in the long run. When most people are starting out streaming, audio is unfortunately an afterthought. Some assume they'll take a feed from their front of house mixer and then they realize it sounds terrible. The requirements for live streaming audio are quite different from what's required at front of house and what's happening in your room. On the stream, you don't have the benefit of any of the direct sound off of the stage, such as your drums, or of the ambient sound from the room itself, such as the crowd noise and natural room reverb. You also have a very different dynamic range to deal with. Your sound system will put out anywhere from around 60 dB when someone is speaking, up to 100 dB when you're playing music. And you just can't send that amount of dynamic range over your stream. You've got to bring those extremes closer together and create a more consistent level in order to create a good experience for your viewers. So some best practices for live streaming audio are: use ambient crowd mics to give your viewers a sense of the room and the congregation. If you're using IEMs and have crowd mics fed to those already, that's a perfect place to start. Mic everything, even if you don't mic it for the house. Number 3, use a separate mix for your stream. What does a separate mix look like for you? Back to your roadmap. Look at what you can do right now to make things better. Step 1 would be to use an aux or bus output from your current front of house board and mix that on headphones. That way you can add in things like crowd mics that you send to your stream but not to the house mix. Step 2 would be to use that same aux or bus output but mix it remotely, maybe through an iPad app or something like Yamaha's Studio Manager. This is actually where I started a few years ago. I split all my channels in a DM2000 using the first 48 channels for front of house, and then I duplicated all the channels for a second 48 that were sent to a bus for the stream. I had someone using studio monitors and a computer with Studio Manager software on it, and they mixed the stream like that through a mouse. It wasn't ideal, but it produced okay results, and it was a marker along our roadmap to getting where I wanted to be. Step 3, the best solution, would be to have a completely isolated split of all your audio channels, sending them to both front of house and a separate broadcast location with a completely separate mixer for you to mix the stream. This way, an operator has full control over creating the mix for your stream without being influenced by what local sound is happening in the room. If you want, you can check out one of my other videos about how I actually am doing this now through a DAW on a computer, which saved us a lot of money rather than having to purchase an entire second mixer. In a future video in this series about live streaming, I'm going to talk specifically about audio mixing for your live stream, and I'll cover things like ways to deal with that limited amount of dynamic range, as well as some other things you can do to set up volunteers for success who may not be all that experienced in mixing. Finally, when you start streaming your service, you need to get the appropriate licenses that give you permission to stream the copyrighted music that you're singing. There are several companies out there now that are selling this license. Christian Copyright Solutions is one, and recently CCLI has added an additional license you can purchase which will cover your music streaming. I hope this overview has been helpful for some of you looking to begin streaming or improve your streaming experience. Subscribe to my channel if you'd like to be notified about my future videos. I'm going to be continuing this series digging deeper into some of these topics like cameras and lighting and audio. Until next time, I wish you great success with your streaming endeavors. Thanks for watching.